What's the craziest rich kid breakdown you saw? At our school's $1 million fundraiser, a donor's son shut off the lights, projected a giant "Be With Me" on the wall using photos she didn't even know he had, and when she walked out, he grabbed the mic and screamed, "Do you know how much this cost?" in front of every parent in the room. I went to a private high school where money wasn't just normal. It was basically a personality trait. Most people were chill about it, but there were a few families who treated the place like a stage for their kids to perform on. One of those kids was Daniel. His parents donated constantly. His last name was on a plaque in the new science wing, and he acted like everything in the school existed slightly for his convenience. Daniel wasn't a bad guy exactly, just someone who had never really been told no. Junior year, there was this girl in our grade who was popular, but not in the flashy way. She was quiet, good at sports, had a normal group of friends, and didn't really play into the social hierarchy. Daniel decided he liked her. Not in a subtle way, more like in a "this is now a project" way. At first it was just big gestures. Expensive gifts left in her locker. Food deliveries to the front office with her name on them. Once he had a string quartet show up during lunch and play near her table. She looked mortified every time. She kept telling him she wasn't interested. Not cruelly, just clearly. He didn't hear it. The meltdown happened during the annual spring fundraiser. Parents, donors, alumni. Everyone showed up because it doubled as a networking event. Students were supposed to volunteer or perform. Daniel signed up to organize entertainment, which nobody questioned because his family basically sponsored half the event. About halfway through the evening, the lights in the main hall cut out. Everyone thought it was part of the program. Then spotlights came on, music started blasting, and a massive projection appeared on the wall. It was a slideshow. Photos of him and the girl taken from school events, group pictures, candid shots she clearly didn't know he had cropped. The final slide was a giant "Be With Me" in gold lettering. You could actually hear people whispering in confusion. She stood up immediately and walked out. No yelling, no scene. Just gone. The music kept playing for a few seconds too long before someone finally shut it off. Daniel stood there on stage smiling at first, like he thought she just needed a moment. Then people started murmuring louder. Some parents looked uncomfortable. A teacher rushed over and tried to talk to him quietly. That's when it flipped. He started asking where she went. Loudly, then louder. Someone told him she'd left the building. He grabbed the microphone and said something like, "Are you serious right now?" and laughed, but it didn't sound like a joke. The laughter turned into him ranting about how much effort he'd put in, how embarrassing this was for him, how people were supposed to appreciate gestures like this. Teachers tried to take the mic. He wouldn't let go. At one point he said, "Do you know how much this cost?" which made the whole room go dead quiet. That was the moment everyone realized this wasn't romantic to him. It was transactional. Parents started pulling their kids away. His own mom was crying near the entrance while his dad argued with the event coordinator about who allowed the girl to leave early. Meanwhile, Daniel was still on stage, red-faced, yelling about how ungrateful people were and how he was being humiliated. The next week at school was brutal. Videos had spread everywhere. People imitated his speech in the hallways. Even students who normally stayed out of drama were talking about it. He stopped showing up after a few days and finished the year remotely. Story 2. This happened when I was in 9th grade. Our school hosted this big annual academic showcase where students presented projects, science builds, engineering stuff, research displays, art installations, all mixed together. Parents treated it like a gala. There was catering, speeches, donors walking around shaking hands. For most of us, it was just a stressful night where you stood next to a poster and hoped people asked easy questions. One student in my grade came from a very wealthy family that was heavily involved with the school. His parents funded a lot of programs, and everyone knew it. He was smart, but more importantly, he was used to being praised constantly. Teachers highlighted his work, administrators mentioned him during announcements, and people just kind of assumed he'd win whatever category he entered. That year, he built this extremely elaborate project. Expensive materials, professional-looking display, the whole thing. It looked impressive, but if you actually listened to him explain it, it was pretty clear most of the technical work had been guided by outside help. Meanwhile, another student quietly put together a simpler project that actually worked better and answered questions confidently. When awards were announced, the quieter student won first place. You could feel the shift immediately. The rich kid froze. His parents stopped clapping halfway through. At first, it just looked like disappointment. disappointment, which is normal. Then his dad stood up and walked straight toward the judge's table while people were still applauding. He started asking questions loudly, not shouting yet, just aggressively demanding explanations about scoring criteria and fairness. The judges tried to calm him down, saying everything had been reviewed independently. That's when his voice got sharp enough that conversations around the room started dying off. He accused them of favoritism, said the judging process must have been flawed, said people didn't understand the level of investment his son had put into the project. The word investment stuck out because it sounded less like pride and more like a financial complaint. Staff tried to move the conversation aside, but he kept going, pulling attention back to himself. At one point, he asked how a homemade display could possibly beat something professionally assembled, which made the whole situation worse because it sounded insulting to the other student. The son just stood there next to his project, red-faced, not saying a word. That was honestly the hardest part to watch. He looked like he wanted to disappear. Eventually, the head of school stepped in and told the dad the discussion was over for the evening. Instead of backing down, he announced that his family would reconsider future donations if this was how excellence was treated. You could hear people audibly sigh. A few parents started ushering their kids toward the exits because it had gotten so uncomfortable. The event basically ended early after that. Nobody wanted to celebrate anymore. Story 3. I went to a ridiculously expensive prep academy where half the parking lot looked like a luxury car dealership on parent-teacher night. Most of us were scholarship kids or children of faculty. The rest were heirs to things with and sons in the company name. Enter Julian. Julian transferred in junior year. Perfect hair, permanent smirk, and a habit of correcting teachers mid-sentence. His father owned a chain of boutique hotels. His mother chaired at least 3 galas a year. He made sure everyone knew both facts by October. Julian didn't just want attention. He required it. Midway through the year, our school announced a new policy. Seniors could apply for limited off-campus lunch privileges if they maintained a certain GPA and had no disciplinary issues. It was a big deal because we were basically locked in a stone and ivy prison from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Julian barely qualified academically, but he squeaked through. The week passes were distributed on a Friday. Monday morning, he rolls into the student parking lot in something that didn't belong within 100 miles of a high school, a low, silver supercar that sounded like an angry chainsaw when he revved it. I later found out it was a limited production model from some Italian manufacturer I can't pronounce, but at the time all we knew was that it looked like it cost more than our science wing. He parked diagonally across 2 spots. Of course he did. By lunch, he had gathered half the senior class around it, remote key fob dangling from his fingers like a prop. He kept tapping the unlock button so the lights flashed while he talked about horsepower. 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds, he kept saying, as if that was relevant to getting a sandwich. Now here's where it unraveled. The assistant headmaster, a former Marine with the patience of a saint and the posture of a statue, walked into the parking lot just as Julian decided to demonstrate the engine. He didn't just start it, he floored it. The roar echoed off the brick buildings, setting off at least 3 other car alarms. A flock of birds took off from the chapel roof. It sounded like an aircraft trying to taxi for takeoff. The Marine didn't yell. He just stood there, hands behind his back, waiting. Julian cut the engine, stepped out grinning, and said, "What? It's not against the rules to start your car." The assistant headmaster asked him to come to the office. 10 minutes later, word spread that Julian's lunch pass had been revoked. Apparently, the handbook included a clause about reckless or disruptive behavior in school facilities. Revoked passes meant no off-campus privileges for the rest of the semester. For anyone else, that would have been embarrassing. For Julian, it was apocalyptic. He stormed back into the cafeteria red-faced, tie half undone, slamming his tray down so hard milk splashed onto the table. "This place is a joke," he snapped. "You can't punish someone for owning something nice." People stared. Someone laughed. That's when he lost it. He stood up and launched into a full speech about how his tuition funded the school's mediocre football team and how the administration should be thanking his family for their annual donations. He actually said, "My dad could buy this campus." A sophomore at the next table muttered, "Then maybe he should." Julian whipped around and demanded to know who said it. When no one answered, he shoved his chair over and walked straight to the front office again. What happened in there became legend. According to the secretary, whose nephew was in my chemistry class, Julian called his father on speaker and insisted the school fix this immediately. His father apparently told him to hand the phone to the headmaster. 5 minutes later, Julian walked out of the office looking like he'd swallowed glass. His father hadn't defended him. He'd apologized to the headmaster. Not only that, he informed Julian that the car was being taken back. He'd leased it as a motivational reward for improving his grades. grades. The contract, as it turned out, had conditions. The car disappeared the next day. Story 4. Our school had a family everyone knew. Not because they were loud, but because their surname was etched onto half the campus. Science lab, auditorium seats, even a scholarship fund. They had 2 daughters enrolled at the same time, Eleanor and Paige. Eleanor was the headline child, debate captain, lead in the fall production. Teachers described her as polished. She wore tailored blazers that didn't quite match the standard uniform, but somehow no one corrected her. When she spoke, adults leaned in. Paige was a year behind her and might as well have been invisible. Same last name, same face shape, but she carried herself like she was apologizing for taking up space. Her backpack had frayed straps. Her phone was at least 3 models outdated. If Eleanor received a brand new laptop for a project, Paige inherited it the following semester. Stickers already peeling. It wasn't subtle. The explosion happened at the end-of-year awards assembly, the kind where parents sit in the front rows and clap at every name that remotely resembles their own. The biggest honor was the headmaster's medal, supposedly awarded for exceptional academic distinction and leadership. Everyone assumed Eleanor would receive it. She had been curated for it all year. When the headmaster opened the envelope, there was this theatrical pause. Then he announced Paige's name. For half a second, nobody moved. Paige looked genuinely startled, like someone had called the wrong number. A few students started clapping, then more joined in. The applause grew, hesitant at first, then louder. Eleanor didn't clap. She stood up slowly, perfectly straight, and walked onto the stage before Paige even made it out of her seat. At first, we thought she was going to hug her sister. Instead, she leaned toward the microphone and said, very clearly, "There's been a mistake." You could feel the air tighten. The headmaster tried to gently guide her aside, but she stepped back, knocking the small pedestal that held the spare medals. One fell, clinking sharply against the floor. She wasn't screaming. That would have been easier to process. She was speaking in this controlled, brittle voice. I completed more service hours. I led 2 teams. I have higher exam scores. This is mine. Paige had frozen halfway up the stairs, clutching the program so tightly it crumpled in her hands. Their parents were in the front row. Their mother's smile had collapsed into something hard and unreadable. Their father didn't stand. He didn't say a word. The headmaster finally said calmly that the decision was unanimous and final. That's when Eleanor's composure cracked. She grabbed the glass award meant for Paige off the table and held it out like evidence. For a second, I thought she might hand it over. Instead, her grip slipped, or maybe she let it slip. The trophy hit the stage edge and split clean in 2 before skidding across the marble. Gasps everywhere. Teachers rushed forward. Someone escorted Eleanor off stage while she insisted this was humiliating and unfair. She kept repeating the word unfair, like if she said it enough times the room would agree. Paige eventually walked up alone to accept what was left of the medal. The applause was louder this time, but strained. The part I'll never forget happened afterward in the hallway. Eleanor was sitting on a bench outside the auditorium, eyes red but jaw tight. Paige approached her cautiously, medal in hand. Eleanor looked at it, then at her sister, and said in this exhausted whisper, "You don't get it. If I'm not the best, I don't matter." Paige didn't answer. She just stood there. Eleanor walked on that stage like she was the CEO of Oxygen. "There's been a mistake. Ma'am, this is an awards assembly, not a hostage negotiation. You don't interrupt your sister's win like it's a math error on a receipt." And the calm villain voice? That wasn't confidence. That was, "I've built my entire personality on applause and now I'm buffering. If I'm not the best, I don't matter." That's not ambition. That's emotional Wi-Fi with 1 bar. Meanwhile, Paige has been living like the family's trial version child. Hand-me-down laptop. Hand-me-down attention. Probably hand-me-down oxygen too. And when she finally wins something on her own, Big Sister storms the stage like she's reclaiming a throne in a fantasy drama. Girl, this is high school, not medieval succession law. And dropping the trophy? That wasn't a slip. That was a live demonstration of, if I can't shine, nobody glows. The wildest part? The parents walking past both of them to talk to the headmaster. That's not parenting. That's public relations damage control. Honestly, the real villain origin story here isn't Eleanor losing. It's growing up in a house where love sounds like applause and silence sounds like failure. But still, you don't hijack your sister's moment because your ego is on life support. Paige earned it. Eleanor earned therapy. Before we move on to the next story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Let me know your favorite part in the comments and share your own story too. Has anything like this ever happened to you? Story 5. This happened during my final year at a private arts academy. It wasn't technically a boarding school, but most students treated it like one because so many came from overseas or wealthy families who rented apartments nearby. There was a girl in my program named Camille. She wasn't loud or arrogant in the obvious way. She was calm, soft-spoken, always perfectly put together. Expensive clothes, but understated. The kind of person who never checked prices because it simply didn't occur to her. What set her apart wasn't showing off. It was how detached she seemed from inconvenience. Late trains, broken equipment, group members not pulling their weight. Nothing ever rattled her. Until the day something finally did. Our class had spent weeks preparing a collaborative exhibition. Everyone contributed pieces, and the opening night mattered a lot because gallery representatives and donors attended. People were stressed. Some of us barely slept the week leading up to it. Camille had a centerpiece installation that required delicate lighting equipment she'd ordered herself instead of using the school's supplies. She kept saying she wanted it exactly right. On the afternoon of setup, one of the lighting rigs malfunctioned. Not destroyed, not stolen, just dead. The bulb housing shorted out. Annoying but fixable. The technician said he could replace it the next morning before the opening. Most of us shrugged and moved on. Camille didn't. At first, she just stared at it, silent. Then she asked how long it would take. When the technician repeated, "tomorrow morning," something in her expression changed. Not anger, exactly, more like disbelief. She kept repeating, "but it won't be perfect tonight." People tried to reassure her. The exhibition wasn't even open yet. No one outside the class would see it. That somehow made it worse. She started pacing, talking faster, saying the entire piece was ruined because the shadows wouldn't fall correctly. Someone joked that nobody would notice except her. She snapped back immediately, voice shaking. "That's the point. I would notice." And then it escalated. She called her parents right there in the gallery space. Not quietly. She was speaking in another language at first, then switched to English halfway through, clearly upset. Words like unacceptable and embarrassing kept coming up. Within an hour, a private technician showed up. Not from the school, someone her family had contacted directly. He brought replacement parts, tools, even backup fixtures. The rest of us were standing around in paint-stained clothes, watching this unfold like it was a different reality. But the meltdown didn't actually peak until the technician finished and asked her to test the lighting. It worked perfectly. Instead of calming down, Camille started crying. Not loud sobbing, quiet, frustrated tears. She kept apologizing to everyone, saying she hated feeling out of control, that things were supposed to go smoothly if you planned properly. She said she'd never had something important not go according to plan before, and she didn't know how to handle it. Story 6. I was working as a summer camp counselor for a leadership program that mostly pulled students from elite private schools in the area. The first day of check-in was chaotic but normal. Parents fussing over luggage, students texting nonstop, everyone trying to claim the best cabin. Then came Oliver. Oliver had that perfectly groomed, I own the world energy. Polo shirt tucked in, expensive sneakers, haircut like he just walked off a magazine cover. His parents were clearly used to giving in to every whim because he was marching into the registration tent with a level of entitlement I hadn't seen from anyone under 18. It started when he realized his favorite backpack, a limited edition leather designer piece, had a scratch from being handled by the luggage staff. Not a tear, not ruin, just a visible dent. He stopped in the middle of the line, ripped it off his shoulder, and spun around. "This is unacceptable," he shouted, in a voice loud enough to stop 3 other groups of students. I will not be treated this way. Do you know how much this costs? Do you know how much?" His mother tried to calm him. "Oliver, it's just a scratch." "Wool, I don't care," he yelled, and I swear he nearly vibrated from the intensity. He dropped the bag on the table, opened it, and started rifling through everything inside. Laptop, notebooks, chargers, shouting about damage to each item as if it were a personal betrayal. The staff tried to explain the policy. "We can't replace it. We can only report." He didn't even let them finish. He stormed out of the tent, screamed at his mother about how nothing was ever fair, and demanded we get him a new backpack right now. Other students watched, some wide-eyed, some smirking. Some counselors whispered, "Oh, he's like this every year." What was wild was how quickly he escalated. One minute he was glaring at the camp staff. The next he was crouched on the ground, hands in the air, crying about how camp ruins everything because nothing is mine. It's all temporary. He demanded we summon his father, threatened to call his own personal assistant, and at one point sat in the dirt, arms crossed, refusing to move until justice was done. His mom finally gave in and ordered a replacement online from her phone mid-meltdown, while Oliver watched like a general inspecting troops. By the time we finished registration, he had a brand new backpack, untouched, already labeled with his initials in gold foil. He spent the rest of the week treating camp like a hostage negotiation. He He refused to participate in team exercises unless he had the correct supplies. He vetoed meals he didn't like, rearranged cabin assignments, and spent an hour lecturing younger campers on how to properly use their backpacks. By Friday, he had worn the counselors down into near compliance for the smallest requests. I'd never seen someone turn an object into a full-blown personal army before. Story 7. I went to a private boarding school in the Midwest, one of those places where most of the dorm rooms came with their own mini fridges and some students had personal maids visiting on the weekends. I was there on a scholarship, so I quickly learned the subtle ways the rich kids competed. Not grades, not sports. They competed in a well theater. One day in the common room, a group of seniors started arguing about who had the least extravagant summer vacation. I was sitting at a corner table pretending not to listen, but it quickly escalated. It began with a calm voice. My family only rented a villa in Tuscany this year. Nothing fancy, just 6 bedrooms. Another chimed in casually. Well, my parents let me stay at my friend's yacht in the Caribbean, but it was anchored, so technically I didn't own the experience. The first kid gasped, horrified. Wait, so that counts as luxury? My Tuscany trip isn't even fancy if you've stayed on a yacht. The third kid jumped in, voice shaking. You guys don't understand. We only went to our ranch in Montana for 2 weeks. The stable has 8 horses, yes, but we only rode 4 because the others were off-duty. That's basically poverty. And then it happened. The first kid lost it. Face red, veins visible on his neck, pacing back and forth. No, my family's life is worse. The Tuscany villa doesn't count. It's a villa they lend us. They didn't even rent it first. This is discrimination. He grabbed a pillow from the couch and threw it at the wall, narrowly missing a Tiffany-style lamp. Another kid, clearly trying to reason, said, Bro, we all have private jets. It's okay. We're all rich. No. The first kid screamed, flailing his hands. You don't understand. My summer was stressful because I had to choose which charity gala to attend first. That's true suffering. We barely had a moment to ride horses and jet ski before my personal stylist booked me for fittings. By this point, the common room had gone completely silent. Even the staff who were passing through froze, unsure if they should intervene. Finally, he collapsed dramatically onto the couch, hands over his face, muttering about injustice and how no one appreciates the struggles of privilege. The other boys nodded solemnly, as if his breakdown validated their own absurdly luxurious hardships. Story 8. I was at a regional scholastic tournament for high school chess. Most of the players were quiet, polite, a little nerdy, exactly what you'd expect. Then there was Sebastian, a senior from one of the most expensive prep schools in the state. He always had the latest leather-bound notebooks, a custom chess set he carried in a velvet case, and a little entourage of junior students trailing him around. He'd never lost a match in our division. Everyone knew it. People whispered about how he had a private coach who flew in weekly from New York. My friend, who went to a public school, got paired against him in round 3. Completely unexpected. My friend wasn't bad. He had solid strategies, but he definitely wasn't elite like Sebastian. The match started, and after about 30 minutes, it became clear my friend had a winning position. Sebastian's face went pale. His hands started shaking slightly as he moved the pieces. The crowd around the board began to murmur. Then it happened. Sebastian slammed his hand down on the table, making the pieces rattle. This isn't possible. I've never lost. This isn't fair. The tournament director tried to calm him. Sir, it's just a game. Please continue. I refuse, he yelled, standing up so quickly that his chair tipped backward. His velvet case flew open, scattering chess pieces everywhere. A few junior students gasped. He started pacing around the room, muttering about unfair conditions, how the board was tilted, and how my friend obviously cheated. He even demanded a recount of the moves, as if the game could magically undo itself. The worst part? He began dragging pieces off the board and tossing them onto the floor, one by one, yelling about how the rook was defective and the bishop was crooked. At one point, he actually tried to pick up the whole table and shake it. Spectators were frozen. Parents looked horrified. My friend sat there blinking, unsure if he should laugh or call security. Finally, the director stepped in and politely insisted Sebastian leave the room. He stomped out, screaming, I will never play here again. This place is corrupt. My family is going to hear about this. The next day, he returned with a brand new chess set, gold inlays, imported wood, declaring he was training to reclaim his honor. Everyone just stared. Some of us couldn't stop whispering about the meltdown that would probably go down in tournament history. Story 9. I was working part-time as a student assistant in the dining hall of a private boarding school. Most of the students were polite, quietly elite, and almost painfully conscious of appearances. Then there was Victor. Victor, a junior who made it his personal mission to remind everyone exactly how much money his family had. One Friday, the dining hall served a special tasting lunch: truffle pasta, smoked salmon, fancy cheeses. The meals were plated individually and quite expensive, though everyone on campus got them. Victor arrived late, backpack perfectly pressed, and immediately demanded a table near the headmaster's reserve section. No one protested. Then he noticed something. The serving staff had plated a small piece of caviar for each student, including him, but the portion on his plate wasn't perfectly symmetrical. The tiny mound of black pearls was slightly off-center. He froze. Everyone else was quietly enjoying their food. Victor stared at the plate as if it had personally insulted him. "Excuse me," he barked. "This is unacceptable. Who prepared this? I need this fixed immediately." The staff member tried to calm him. "Sir, it's plated exactly like everyone else." "I don't care," he shouted, slamming his hands on the table so hard that silverware jumped. "It must be perfect. I didn't pay for a subpar experience." Students nearby looked at each other, confused. The murmurs spread. Some laughed quietly, others just stared. Victor's meltdown escalated fast. He began shouting about how the chef obviously didn't respect him, how he could buy the entire catering budget if he wanted, and how no one understands the responsibilities of having wealth and taste. He stood up, knocked his chair over, and refused to eat anything until the serving staff rearranged his caviar into a perfectly centered mound on a new plate. When they finally complied, 5 minutes later, he inspected it for another full minute before sitting down with a satisfied, though still furious, sigh. The next day, he was telling anyone who would listen that the dining hall staff were criminally incompetent, and that the school needs standards worthy of its students. Students nearby started joking about Victor's caviar incident, and it became an unofficial legend. Story 10. This was senior year at a private university that fed directly from elite prep schools. You could tell who grew up insulated. They moved through campus like everything was adjustable if you just pushed hard enough. There was this guy, Adrian. His family name was on a hospital wing somewhere. Not local famous. National level board of directors famous. He didn't brag outright, but he didn't hide it either. His solution to most inconveniences was, "I'll handle it." Adrian joined a social club that prided itself on exclusivity. They planned a huge spring gala at an upscale rooftop venue in the city. Weeks of hype, custom invitations, dress code that required tailoring. 3 hours before the event, the venue canceled. Some permit issue, fire code, whatever. Normal people would panic, reschedule, maybe eat the deposit. Adrian did not react like a normal person. He went very still. Then he stepped outside, phone already out, pacing like he was negotiating a merger. About 40 minutes later, he came back inside and announced, "It's fine. I've arranged something better." Nobody knew what that meant. At 8:15 p.m., when everyone was dressed and standing awkwardly in the student parking lot waiting for instructions, we heard it before we saw it. Rotor blades. He had chartered 2 helicopters, not for a scenic ride, for transportation. They were going to shuttle small groups of formally dressed college students to a private estate outside the city that owed his family a favor. People were stunned, some impressed, some horrified. We later found out the estate belonged to a family friend who ran corporate retreats. Adrian had called, explained the situation, and essentially pressured them into opening the property on almost no notice. The meltdown part came when the logistics didn't go perfectly. The helicopters couldn't carry everyone at once. There were weight limits, wind conditions, delays. Students were stranded in the lot waiting for return trips. Some parents started calling. Campus security got involved because, shockingly, charter aircraft landing near dorms raises questions. Adrian started snapping at everyone. This was supposed to be seamless. He yelled at one of his own club members who had nothing to do with aviation. When someone suggested maybe just canceling and grabbing dinner locally, he lost it. "Do you have any idea how much this cost?" he shouted. "You don't back out after I fix it." That was the thing. This wasn't generosity. It was damage control for his pride. The original venue canceling had embarrassed him personally because he'd been the one championing the rooftop as iconic. By the time the final group arrived at the estate, the mood was off. Instead of glamorous, it felt tense. Staff members were clearly irritated. The catering was rushed. The music system kept cutting out. At one point, I saw Adrian standing alone near the pool, staring at his phone while 2 different coordinators tried to get his attention about payment details. He looked furious, not at anyone specific, but at the fact that even after throwing obscene amounts of money and machinery at the problem, he couldn't manufacture the perfect narrative he'd promised. The next week, rumors circulated that the property owner had sent an invoice so massive it made even him blink. There were also whispers that campus administration was investigating the unauthorized aircraft landing. Adrian never mentioned the helicopters again. This rich kid Adrian, family name on buildings bigger than your future, gets his fancy gala venue cancelled 3 hours before showtime. Normal people. Sad trombone. Adrian. Full main character meltdown. Phones out 40 minutes later. I fixed it. Something better. Q2 charter helicopters landing in the parking lot to airlift these tuxedoed clowns to a private estate. Half the group stranded like bad Tinder dates. Parents freaking. Campus security losing it over illegal choppers on dorm grass. Adrian starts screaming. This was supposed to be seamless. Do you know how much this cost? Bro turned a logistics fail into an ego nuke. Threw obscene money at Pride damage control. Ended up with his staff, glitchy music, and a bill so big even he blinked. Next week, admin sniffing around, invoice from hell, Adrian pretending helicopters were never a thing. Friday for thinking he's the walking definition of money can't buy class, NTA. Adrian, YTA, helicopter-sized, trust fund-sized asshole. Like, if you hate rich kid energy, comment your verdict. Subscribe for more cursed flex fails. Peace. Before we move on to the next story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Let me know your favorite part in the comments and share your own story too. Has anything like this ever happened to you? Story 11. I didn't attend the school as a student. I worked there part-time during a semester gap, helping supervise study hall and assisting teachers with grading logistics. It was a small, expensive private academy where most problems disappeared if parents complained loudly enough. There was one senior everyone knew, not because he was talented or particularly smart, but because he operated like rules were suggestions meant for other people. He arrived late constantly, ignored deadlines, and talked openly about how grades didn't matter because he already had connections lined up. His big issue that term was a mandatory senior capstone project. Students had to work in small teams and present something at the end of the semester. Simple enough. Most groups finished early. His group didn't. The other students carried most of the work while he skipped meetings or showed up unprepared. When presentation day came, it was obvious who had done the actual effort. The teacher graded individually instead of giving the whole group the same mark. Everyone else passed comfortably. He didn't. The reaction wasn't explosive at first. He just stared at the grade sheet like it was written in another language. Then came the bargaining. There's been a mistake, he said flatly. The teacher calmly explained the rubric, pointing out missing sections and lack of participation. Completely reasonable. Documented. Clear. That's when his voice started rising. You don't understand, he said, getting louder with every sentence. I can't fail this. I've already told people I'm graduating with honors. The teacher repeated that the grade reflected the work submitted. He laughed, but it sounded forced. Okay, so what do we do to fix it? When she said there wasn't anything to fix, that the term was over, he snapped. He started pacing the classroom, running his hands through his hair, talking about how unfair it was that group dynamics affected his future. He accused the other students of sabotaging him. At one point, he actually said, "My parents donate here. This doesn't make sense." The room went silent. The teacher didn't argue. She just said the decision was final and asked him to step outside if he needed to cool down. Instead, he pulled out his phone and loudly announced he was calling his father. Not quietly either. He wanted everyone to hear. He described the situation like he'd been wronged, emphasizing how this would ruin opportunities. The call didn't go the way he expected. We couldn't hear the other side, but his expression changed fast. Confidence turned into frustration, then embarrassment. He muttered a few short replies, hung up, and just stood there for a second. Apparently, even his parents weren't willing to fight this one. He left without another word. Story 12. I went to a private day school from middle school through graduation. My family wasn't wealthy. I was there because my parents prioritized academics above everything else and stretched themselves thin to make it work. Most of my classmates had grown up in a completely different reality. Vacations, tutors, private coaches, all normal to them. The meltdown I remember most didn't involve grades or sports or money directly. It happened during a charity week the school hosted every year. The idea was that students organized events to raise funds for different causes, and the administration made a huge deal about leadership and compassion. One girl in my grade, I'll call her Elise, had built her entire identity around being admired. She was always in charge of committees, always speaking at assemblies, always positioned as the example student. Teachers loved her because she was polished and confident. That year, another student quietly organized a fundraiser for a local shelter. Nothing flashy, just a small event that unexpectedly got a lot of attention because people actually showed up and participated. Teachers praised it during announcements. Students talked about it for days. Elise was supposed to be leading the main charity gala that week, and suddenly she wasn't the center of the conversation anymore. At first, she acted supportive, smiled, clapped, congratulated people, but you could see the tension building. She started correcting people publicly, reminding them that the gala was the official event and that smaller fundraisers weren't coordinated through her committee. Then, during a planning meeting, someone suggested combining the remaining events so more money could go to the shelter project. It was a reasonable idea. Elise completely unraveled. She started arguing that it would undermine months of work. Her voice kept getting louder until the teacher supervising the meeting asked her to calm down. Instead, she accused other students of trying to steal credit and said people only cared because the project was emotionally manipulative. The room went silent. No one knew how to respond. She left halfway through the meeting, crying, and spent the next few days telling people that the school had turned against her and that nobody appreciated how much pressure she was under to succeed. At one point, she refused to attend classes because she said the environment had become hostile. The strange part was that nothing bad had actually happened to her. No punishment, no humiliation. She just couldn't handle not being the focal point anymore. The gala still happened. The other fundraiser continued too. Eventually, everything settled down, but the atmosphere shifted. People stopped taking her as seriously after that. Years later, I heard she's doing fine. Corporate job, impressive resume, the kind of life that looks perfect from the outside. But that moment stuck with me. It wasn't loud or violent. It was watching someone who had always been rewarded for performing excellence suddenly panic when approval wasn't guaranteed. Elite private school charity week. Elise, the golden girl, always running everything. Teacher's pet, center of the universe vibes. Quiet kid runs a chill shelter fundraiser. It pops off, teachers praise it, kids obsessed. Spotlight shifts for like 5 seconds. Elise? Fake nice at first, then full Karen mode. That's not official. My gala is the main event. Starts gatekeeping, public corrections, planning meeting. Someone suggests combining events for more money to the cause. Normal idea. Elise detonates. Screaming about undermining her work, accuses credit stealing, calls the other thing emotionally manipulative. Teacher says chill. She storms out bawling, skips class claiming the school's hostile, and nobody gets her pressure to succeed. Zero actual consequences. She just blue screened when she wasn't the main character anymore. Gala happens. Fundraiser keeps going. Everyone quietly decides she's exhausting. Aita for thinking she's peak, can't handle not being worshipped. Energy? NTA. Elise? YTA. Fragile ego, spotlight addict, tantrum throwing queen. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Got a story to share? Drop it in the comments and let us know which one was your favorite.